everyone, my name is Claire Mallen and I wanted to thank you all for sitting in and listening to my presentation, Assessing Methods for Determining Reference Conditions for Riparian Restoration in Santa Clara County. Today I'll give you a brief introduction to riparian ecology, restoration and mitigation, and background about the setting to get you all situated. Then I'll go over the purpose and objectives of the study, and I'll tell you a little bit about the methods I used to conduct the study. Then I'll go over my results and recommendations. So this project is very personal to me because in addition to being a graduate student at USF, I work at Valley Water. And this project was done in addition to my work duties as research and development for the implementation of a county-wide reference vegetation condition study. Valley Water is a nationally recognized water resources agency which provides drinking water, flood protection, and stream stewardship for 1.9 million Santa Clara County residents. At Valley Water, the operation and maintenance of infrastructure for water supply and flood control projects often require work within legally protected environments and are often required by local, state, and federal regulators to conduct compensatory mitigation and restoration to offset those impacts to regulated environments. Ecological restoration is the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. Can happen at a variety of scales and for a variety of purposes. Compensatory mitigation is a type of ecological restoration that is legally required from federal, state, or regional regulators which aim to restore specific vegetation communities that have been impacted through a governmental or private action. Successful restoration projects require the defined goals and objectives which steer the planning and implementation and monitoring processes. In compensatory mitigation, goals are set by the regulatory agency through mitigation permits. Mitigation permits outline several conditions like how long the project will be monitored for, the size of the project, and success criteria, which are used to evaluate the success of the project to determine whether the project is in or out of compliance. The most common success criteria measure vegetation success with parameters like % vegetative cover, % mortality, and % non-native cover. However, the regulators can also include other success criteria which measure water quality and habitat quality. The success criteria set by regulatory agencies are often defined without using a regionally appropriate reference site for comparison and are not uniform among projects, regions, or agencies. This can make it difficult for projects to achieve compliance, and with projects that require permits from multiple agencies, conflicting success criteria can prove even more difficult to manage and achieve compliance. Additionally, if success criteria do not capture key regional ecosystem characteristics, regulatory compliance with the criteria may not even mean the mitigation is successful at restoring proper ecological function. So it's really important that success criteria set by regulators are based on ambient regional reference ecosystems. Therefore, today I'm going to talk about how using reference sites can help in mitigation planning for riparian ecosystems and how we can define reference conditions for Santa Clara County and help standardize success criteria for the region. Riparian ecosystems are fundamentally transitional areas between terrestrial and aquatic habitats and are influenced by many various biotic and abiotic processes that create extremely diverse habitats ranging from dense riparian forests to sparsely vegetated gravel bars. Properly functioning riparian vegetation has complex structures and diverse species composition, which provides critical habitat for native bird, mammal, reptile, and amphibian populations. They also provide clean drinking water, flood control, sediment storage, and recreation opportunities. Despite the immense importance of riparian ecosystems, they have been degraded and lost at an alarming rate. It is estimated that 85 to 98% of California's native riparian vegetation has been lost over the past 150 years due to land use and land conversion. Santa Clara County is located in the southern region of the San Francisco Bay Area. Due to the long human history of settlement in the region, Santa Clara County has observed major changes to native vegetation communities, such as riparian ecosystems. To ensure the conservation and preservation of the county's riparian ecosystems, we need successful mitigation and restoration projects, and one way to guarantee that is by using reference ecosystems in project planning. Reference ecosystems are integral in restoration planning because they provide a model for the ecosystem being restored. Reference ecosystems are relatively pristine ecosystems and have minimal human impact. Using reference ecosystems in restoration and mitigation planning is important because it provides information on how similar ecosystem types are self-sustaining under similar environmental conditions. Additionally, reference ecosystems should be structurally complex, have high biodiversity, have high native species cover and low non-native species cover, and be floristically and structurally similar to other reference ecosystems in the region. Due to the variation in natural ecosystems, it's important to define reference conditions from multiple reference sites. To determine reference conditions for riparian ecosystems, you must first identify the site and then do a field assessment to observe physical conditions. Reference sites are often selected on a project-by-project basis, which requires extensive knowledge of local environmental conditions, which can be time-consuming and challenging. In addition, due to the plethora of riparian and vegetation condition assessment methods that exist, it is difficult to know which method will provide you with valuable data for mitigation and restoration planning. Therefore, the goal of this study is to recommend a methodology for selecting high-quality reference ecosystems using desktop methods and to identify an effective assessment method to determine ambient environmental conditions. To achieve this goal, I first conducted a literature review of existing peer-reviewed literature, government reports, and vegetation and riparian ecosystem assessment protocols. This literature review helped determine a methodology for selecting reference sites from the office using desktop methods and publicly available data sets by identifying which human actions negatively impact our riparian ecosystems and assigning a threshold for suitability as a reference site. The literature review also informed a comparative analysis of 3 vegetation and riparian ecosystem rapid assessments to determine which method is most effective at measuring reference conditions for the purpose of this study. There are many anthropogenic threats on riparian ecosystems which influence proper ecosystem functions. By understanding and quantifying the impact these different threats have on riparian ecosystems, we can determine the quality of an ecosystem and their suitability as a reference site from the office. For this study, I chose to explore 4 specific parameters such as land use classification, presence of non-native species, distance to roads, and history of fire. Using the mentioned data sets for land use, invasive species, roads, and fire, I recommend assigning the following thresholds and buffer distances. For land use, I do not recommend using riparian ecosystems classified as urban or agriculture because of the significant impact on riparian vegetation cover and composition, hydrology, and geomorphology. For riparian ecosystems classified as rangeland, it is important to know about the site history because this can determine the amount of impact to riparian vegetation, hydrology, and geomorphology. However, due to the resilience of riparian vegetation, riparian ecosystems classified as rangeland may be used as reference sites as long as the area is not overgrazed or has been let to rest for 5 years. Lastly, since protected riparian ecosystems are protected for conservation purposes and have higher biodiversity than urban, agricultural, and rangeland ecosystems, riparian ecosystems classified as protected may serve as the best land use type for reference ecosystems. Additionally, when using these selection thresholds, it is important to be aware of edge effects. Since the significant ecological impacts associated with land use don't end at a property boundary, it is important to be aware of protected lands downstream of urban and agricultural land uses and to use best professional judgment when working close to land use boundary shifts. Our next parameter, invasive species, are a large threat to riparian ecosystems because they can outcompete native species and, once established, create monocultures. According to the California Invasive Species Council, there are approximately 217 invasive species in the Central Coast region of California that are found specifically in riparian ecosystems. That means that there is a high risk of invasive species cover in Santa Clara County riparian ecosystems. To determine our selection threshold, I use selection criteria from the California Rapid Assessment Method for wetland and riparian areas. This method uses invasive species cover thresholds as a way to quantify the quality of a wetland and riparian ecosystem. Because tree and shrub species are dominant in riparian ecosystems, an invasive tree and shrubs in the canopy can have a significant impact on surrounding vegetation composition and structure. Reference ecosystems should not have more than 15% cover of invasive tree and shrubs. Additionally, since the majority of invasive species in the region are herbaceous plants, there is a higher risk of having invasive herb species in your riparian ecosystem. Therefore, I recommend using a lower threshold, less than 30% cover, to allow for more flexibility. Third is our road parameter. Since roads can affect vegetation, hydrology, geomorphology, and water quality, it is important that the reference ecosystem should not be directly adjacent to a road. However, studies have shown that contaminants such as heavy metals can significantly decrease in the soil and from vegetation up to 30 meters from a road, and the vegetation impacts from human traffic can be observed up to 50 meters from a road or trail. Therefore, the reference ecosystem should not be at least 50 meters from a road. Last is our wildfire parameter. Since riparian vegetation composition and structure can be heavily impacted from severe wildfire, it is not recommended to use a site that is recently burned. But due to the fact that riparian vegetation can regenerate quickly, for a site to be used as a reference site, it should not have burned within the past 4 years. These 4 parameters were selected because they are all accessible through local, state, and federal government websites. Essentially, the idea is that these data sets can be used separately or overlaid to establish a site suitability model to locate high-quality reference sites within a large ecosystem from the office, then verify conditions in the field. Once the site has been selected in the office, they need to be surveyed in the field to gain data on the physical conditions. This study focuses on 3 rapid assessment methods: the Rapid Stream Riparian Assessment, the California Native Plant Society Vegetation Rapid Assessment, and the California Rapid Assessment Method for wetland and riparian areas. I evaluated the following methods on 3 different levels: on the amount of time to complete one assessment, the amount of training they require, and the actual parameters these methods assess, including vegetation, water quality, and habitat quality. I also looked for parameters which will be useful in restoration and mitigation planning, like species richness, species cover, and placement of species on site. The Rapid Stream Riparian Assessment Method was developed by a group of biologists, ecologists, and geomorphologists in 2006 to create a method to evaluate existing conditions of stream and riparian ecosystems in the arid Southwest. The California Native Plant Society Vegetation Rapid Assessment Method is a widely used method in California, used by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the California State Park System, and the United States Forest Service. The method is a vegetation habitat sampling method which is used to quickly assess information about composition, habitat quality, and site quality for all vegetation types. The last method, the California Rapid Assessment Method, is also widely used in California for assessing wetland and riparian areas. It was developed by technical experts in government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and academia. The California Rapid Assessment Method is used for ambient condition monitoring, monitoring potential project impacts, and compliance monitoring. This leads to my final recommendations. Overall, I recommend using a hybrid method, starting with the California Native Plant Society Vegetation Rapid Assessment, and adding the hydrology and physical structure attributes from the California Rapid Assessment Method, and adding wetland indicator status for dominant species within the plot. I recommend using the California Native Plant Society Vegetation Rapid Assessment because it is truly rapid. It takes a team of 2 people, only 10 to 30 minutes per assessment, and provides detailed information on vegetation. I recommend adding the hydrology and physical structure attributes from the California Rapid Assessment Method because they provide important information on water quality and habitat complexity. Lastly, I recommend determining the wetland indicator status for all dominant species in the plot because it is a characterization for all plant species and describes their affinity for growing in wetlands, uplands, or both. Wetland indicator status can be used to inform managers which plants need to be planted in wetter areas and which plants need to be planted in drier areas. This can help inform planting plans for mitigation and restoration projects and improve plant mortality rates, which is a key vegetation success criteria. Overall, this methodology would allow managers to gain a well-rounded understanding of reference conditions in their region. In conclusion, with the site selection and site condition assessment methodology created through this study, managers can quickly locate high-quality reference sites within a large landscape from the office and conduct several rapid assessments with minimal training to determine reference conditions for their region. These reference conditions can be used to either inform mitigation and restoration planning, help managers negotiate permit conditions with regulatory agencies, or help regulatory agencies standardize success criteria throughout the region. In defining regional reference conditions for riparian ecosystems, managers can ensure their restoration and mitigation projects are successful at restoring proper ecological function and to conserve our riparian ecosystems into the future. I want to thank you all for listening. Do you have any questions?